Hello and welcome to Secret Leaders. Today we've got something a little special. I recently had the opportunity to speak with Professor Scott Galloway for a live interview here in London in an audience full of entrepreneurs. Scott Galloway is a founder, author, and professor of marketing at NYU Stern. We touched on a lot of topics in this conversation, from remote work to the purpose of even having money. But most of all, we spoke about the ideas in his new book, The Algebra of Wealth. With some of the funniest personal stories, Scott explains the 4 components in the equation for building wealth. These are focus, stoicism, time, and diversification. Scott outlines specific strategies he recommends, from developing a savings muscle and harnessing the power of compound interest, to diversifying your investments and building a network of supportive friends and allies. But it's important to note, this isn't about getting rich in the next couple of years. This is not some crypto get-rich-quick scheme vibe. The point of his book, and what you'll hear in this talk, is to give you the advice so that in about 30 years, people ask you, why is your life so much easier? Because as Scott puts it, money should make your life easier. But it's up to us to define what easier really means and to pursue a vision of wealth that encompasses all aspects of a well-lived life. So if you're ready to not just build a successful business, but to create lasting, multi-dimensional wealth, this episode is for you. All right, let's get on to it. Here's Scott Galloway. I hope you enjoy. Big thank you to Professor Scott Galloway for joining us today. A big thank you to TechSpace, who are hosting us. I asked them to, how should I describe them? And as big fans of your work, they said, tell them it's like WeWork, but profitable. Okay. Which I thought was astute. So there's an actual business model behind this one, and not so much ponds. Big thank you to Wednesday's Domain as well, which is, where's Luke? There you go. There is alcoholic beer and wine, but there's also beautiful non-alcoholic, the finest non-alcoholic wine you can have from Luke, with Wednesday's Domain donated to us for afterwards. Pizza is from Yard Sale Pizza. That'll be after this, so roughly 7:30, 7:45. And this is Secret Leaders Live. And I think the last thing to say is it's Mental Health Awareness Week.
Okay.
And actually the reason and purpose behind the founders community is it's fucking lonely doing entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And so bringing people together in a sense of community and doing this together when things are good and when things are bad kind of matters to us.
Great.
So please take a seat.
Okay.
I think it's very important to say that this is investment advice. See, this is the kind of jokes you can make in England. In America, you'd be like, let's not start with that. You scrub that straight off. Okay, so Scott, in entrepreneurship, often you follow your passion or you follow your purpose. You'd probably say that's bullshit, either one of them. What do you think about that? What should entrepreneurs really be doing?
Sure. So first off, thanks. It feels eerily like I'm on trial in the future.
Well, the ruse is up, guys. We might as well just own up.
I'm about to be banned to the 7th moon of Romula if this doesn't go well. I've generally found that anyone who tells you to follow your passion is already rich. And that your job as a young person is to find your talent. And that's not easy. But if you find something you're good at and you can commit to the requisite 10,000 hours of investment and persevering through really difficult things and enduring the only guaranteed attribute of the workplace, which is a series of injustices, if you're willing to potentially make the commitment based on some really core talent that you take to something, and it's not obvious what that is, it wasn't obvious for me, that the mastery of something will make you passionate about whatever it is. So find your talent, and then this is the kind of the second key component. Find your talent in something that has a 90+% employment rate. And by the way, that's 98% of industries. If you want to be an actor, a model, an athlete in the arts, open a restaurant, a nightclub, just recognize that unless you're getting flashing green lights that you're in the top 1% from a very early age, recognize that all your friends who go into non-vanity, non-romantic industries who are less talented than you are going to have a nicer life, despite being much less talented than you. If you're in the top 10% of tax lawyers, you get to fly private and have a larger selection set of mates than you deserve. If you're in the top 10% of basketball players, you get cut from JV basketball in high school. So you'd rather be good in a non-vanity industry than amazing in a vanity industry. And I'm not here to crush your dreams. You want to be an actor, you want to coach Arsenal someday, fine. But if you aren't figuring out really fast, you're in the 0.1%, find something less romantic. There are 180,000 actors in SAG-AFTRA. That's the union in the US for the most talented people in media. These are the best of the best. It's not easy to get into the union. And of those 180,000, 87% didn't qualify for health insurance because they didn't make $23,000 last year. And the millionaire, and what the best is, and what I can promise you, is that anything that you can become a ninja-like master at, the accoutrements of that mastery, economic relevance, camaraderie, prestige, all of those things will make you passionate about whatever it is. I am renovating a house, and I've gotten to know this guy, this Iraqi immigrant, and he's the soapstone guy in Marylebone and all of central London. And he just loves the vein in marble and can talk about marble forever. And he goes to the quarry and he cuts marble, and I've gotten to know him pretty well, and I figured out with back-in-the-hand math, this guy, he's making about $1.5 million a year installing soapstone. And I just can tell he's really passionate about what he does. And just in terms of kind of bringing it down to personal, I thought I was going to be quarterback of the Jets when I was 17. I have a good plane of vision, I have a fantastic arm, and I thought, that's it, I'm going to be a professional football player. And then I got to UCLA and I found out what real quarterbacks looked like, and I wasn't one of them. Then I thought I was going to be a pediatrician, and I took organic chemistry, and I found out the sciences is not for me. And then I thought I was going to be an investment banker. I got a job at Morgan Stanley, and I spent 2 years there figuring out I'm not very good at investment banking. And then I found something called business intelligence and analytics, where you just kind of marinate in data, tell stories. My life, or my professional life, has basically been answering the hardest questions of a 55-year-old white guy who runs a big company. That's what I do. These very powerful people in the 90s and aughts, I would come to me with their most difficult questions, and I could marinate in data and then come back to them with answers. I had never in a million years thought I would do that. And it didn't really have a lot of appeal to me initially, but I was really good at it. And what I've become super passionate about is taking care of my kids. I absolutely love putting my dad in a nice assisted living facility. I'm going to Cannes Lions in a couple weeks, and I'm going to stay at the Hotel du Cap. And I realize I'm sounding very materialistic, but in a capitalist world, Britain and the US become more like themselves every day, and that is they're loving, generous places if you have money, and they're rapacious, violent places if you don't. So I'm not talking about what should be, I'm talking about what is. And I'd rather be Nadal or Federer than me. If I could switch with them, I would. But I'd rather be me than the number 7 or number 8 best tennis player in the world. Because I get to go to Wimbledon, I can buy my way in. And I'm not as nervous, and I have an amazing time. So I'd rather be the number 1 or number 2. I'd rather be Serena Williams. But for the thousands of people that devote their lives to professional tennis and are lucky if they make $10,000 a year and end up starting their lives at 28 or 30, starting pretty much from zero. And that was, all of my roommates were world-class athletes at UCLA. I lived in athlete housing, and a lot of them went to the Olympics, and they were calling me at 28 to try and start their careers. So find your talent and find something you think, I could be in the top 1%. And even if you're in the top just 10% of an industry that's a non-romance industry, you're going to do really well. And in a capitalist society, anything that affords you the opportunity to have real economic vitality makes you passionate about that thing. And they're almost sort of self-excluding, because people say, well, Scott, you're telling us to engage in drudgery. you can't be great at anything you hate. You just can't. So by virtue of the fact you think, I could be great at this, tax lawyers like the law. They find it fascinating. They're good at math. They find the intersection between tax and the law and their ability to communicate with clients and their ability to write well while also having analytical skills. They like that. They enjoy that. So follow your talent. And I worry that young people sometimes mistake hobbies for passion. Just make a shit ton of money Monday through Friday and then be a DJ on the weekends. Back to you.
Which actually is exactly what the CEO of Goldman Sachs does. Just DJs on the weekend.
Right.
Worked out well for him, right? You wrote a book on wealth.
Yep.
I guess, does the world need another book on wealth? And what's your hot take on where you saw the white space?
So this book, it's not a Susie Orman, cut up your credit cards, just pay cash for stuff. This isn't about someone who's in debt and needs credit counseling. The inspiration for the book was, I love that study that says, as parents, we like to think we engineer our kids. And what you find out is they mostly come to you. You're a shepherd. You get to decide where they graze. You can point them in the right direction. You get to choose what food they eat. But the sheep comes to you. And we also like to think that, I can shape my kids' outcomes. And what you realize, all the studies say, is that it's their peer group that is the most important thing. It's more important than their school. It's more important than their parents, the kids they hang out with. And there's a lot of studies that show if you take the 4 people you spend the most time with from the age of 18 to 30, and then you average, you'll become the same body mass index. You support the same teams, same politics, you end up living in the same region. You become almost like mini-me's of each other. Where there's greater variance is all 5 of those people can make the same amount of money, and one will end up economically secure, making no more money than the rest. And so the book is, what are the behaviors and strategies of that one person that ends up much more economically secure despite not making a lot more money than his or her peer group? We've all heard the stories about athletes and lottery winners that make tens of millions of dollars and end up bankrupt. Fortunately, there's stories of millions of civil servants, teachers, people who work in government, who because they were offered and had discipline and character, the ability to have tax-advantaged matched savings programs that never make more than $100,000 a year in their life and get to my age and they're multimillionaires. And it's not only savings vehicles and certain types of investing, it involves a certain type of character and a certain behavior set. So the book is, what are the character traits and the strategies and the asset classes that one person who never made more money than the other 4 of his or her closest mates, but ended up in a much better financial position. And that's really what the book is about. I'm assuming in this book that you kind of have your act together, that you know how to make some money, that you've got the skills to make a decent living, but you want to be one of those people that wake up and when you're in your 50s or when you're my age and people go, how come she is just much better off than the rest of us? How come they just have a lot more money than the rest of us and they're able to have a much more stress-free life in their 50s and 60s? It's not a get rich quick scheme. I absolutely think I know how to get you rich. That's the good news. The bad news is the answer is slowly. And if you read the book, and it's not easy, it takes real discipline. And the book has a lot of personal anecdotes. I think the book's more about life than it really is about money. And I'm also trying to be very transparent about my shortcomings and many ways I screwed up financially. And a lot of it was a lack of character in just personal failings that really haunted me financially, but to try and identify those. I always say in the book that wealth is a whole person project, and I'll come back to that. But this is meant to say, what are the behaviors I can adopt early that make me that person that everyone wonders, how did they get so much money? That's the mystery woman you want to be.
And the answer is NFTs, obviously.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, so you have an actual formula.
Yeah.
What is the algebra of wealth?
So the first is focus, and this find your talent, and double down on it. I hate side hustles. A side hustle is fine if you know your main hustle is not what you're going to do, and you want to explore something else. But I think you'd be much better off if you took the incremental time you're investing in a side hustle and poured it into your main hustle, because the difference between being good and being great is 3 to 5x the amount of income you can make. And oftentimes it's just 10 or 20% more effort. Right? Someone used to say, at Morgan Stanley, we always say the success is in the last 10%. Proofing the document one more time, right? One piece of insight that you managed to get in. Oh, let's stay up a little bit later and let's get this chart perfect. So find a focus as soon as possible, and it's hard. I think your 20s is about workshopping and failing. See above, pediatrician, investment banker, athlete, right? It took me 4 swings at the plate. And it wasn't really until I was 27. I started a strategy firm my second year in business school that ultimately ended up getting sold. But anyways, focus. Find something you think you could be great at and go all in on it. And by the way, when I say focus, I mean work your ass off. And I'm not suggesting it's the right way, but it's my way. And that is, if you expect to be in the top 10% of income earners, much less the top 1%, you should never utter the word balance. I think it's just insane. When my kids, when I say my kids, my students, I've taught 5,500 students, and I do a survey at the end of the course. Where do they expect to be economically? And granted, there's some self-selection here. The average salary out of NYU Stern is $212,000. That's the average. So that means anyone who goes into a nonprofit making $80,000, there's someone going to work for $350 for a private equity firm. And these kids, they're 27, 28. That's an amazing income. So they're pretty ambitious, and they're really well certified. But 2/3 of them expect by the time they're 35 to be in the top 1% of income earning Americans, which is $750,000 a year. And then I'll ask them, what are the key attributes of a successful career? And inevitably, about half of them say balance. I'm like, are you high? Unless you're born rich, if you want to be wealthy, or maybe if you're Kanye, like if you're a genius, okay, fine. Assume you're not Kanye, right? What I have found with every person I've met who wasn't born rich, who is now wealthy, they spent 20 to 30 years doing pretty much nothing but working. It's not aspirational. This is not a Hallmark commercial. I'm not suggesting it's the right way. I don't remember my kids as babies because I wasn't there. I lost my hair. My first marriage was a function of me working nonstop. It took a huge toll on me emotionally, mentally, and it was worth it. Or it was worth it for me because I knew at a very young age that I wanted economic security. It was just super important. I wasn't here to be a good person. I had no purpose other than economic security. I didn't give a flying fuck about dolphin-friendly tuna. I didn't understand any of the social justice shit. Didn't make any sense to me. And more power to you if you do, and I'd like to think I've become a little bit more aware as I've gotten older. When I was young, I'm like, I'm gonna get wealthy or die trying. And for me, and you gotta this has to be a safe space because my agreement is I'll be just entirely transparent. My total motivation for getting economic security was women. First and foremost, I wanted to take care of my mom. My mom got very sick, and it was devastating not to be able to take care of her. The second was, on a much less noble basis, I noticed at a very young age that certain guys had a broader selection set of women. And I'm like, why does this guy of average character and average looks seem to always attract really cool, attractive, high character women? I'm like, does it have something to do with his parents' house in Aspen and Palm Springs? I just figured out early I wanted to take care of my mom and I wanted to be more attractive to women. And I know how, I hear that and I want to shower. But it was very motivating for me. And also I wanted to have cool friends and do cool things, but that was very motivating for me. And pretty much, I got my shit together when my mom got sick. But pretty much for the next 20 years, I don't really remember much but working. And that doesn't mean it's the right way, but have a sober conversation with yourself around your expectations and the trade-offs required. If you want to move to a low-cost neighborhood and coach Little League and work 30 to 40 hours a week, a lot of people work to live, they don't live to work. More power to you. I think you can be happy doing that. But you're not going to be able to live in central London. You're not going to be able to send your kids to a private school. You're not going to be able to vacation in Stad. I mean, just resign yourself to the fact that you're going to have to substantially lower your expectations and also find a partner who is in alignment with you around those things. Anyways, focus, work hard, and I'm assuming you want economic security. This book is for people who think, I really do want to have the trappings. When I say economic security, I mean making more than your average bear, so to speak. And then that's the first thing. If you don't make money, it's very hard to have economic security, right? Got to make real money. The next thing is really our multipliers of each other. And it's the product of Stoicism, time, and diversification. Stoicism, it's kind of the wrong word. It's really discipline. And that is try to acknowledge or recognize that no one's thinking about your shit as much as you are. And that buying a bottle of Grey Goose late night at a club isn't that impressive to other people. And that blowing your first year bonus at Morgan Stanley on a BMW, all right, was that smart? How many people, I don't care much about cars, I don't know much about driving, how many people were really that impressed by me at 23 having a BMW? Is that really where you're going to find reward? Do you have discipline? Can you put aside those emotions and think, wow, okay, and this goes on to time. If I had taken that $30,000 and put it in SPY, it would now be worth about 2.9 million, right? Do you have that ability to separate yourself from your emotions, your need to signal, your need to feel attractive, your need to indulge and have a dopa hit? Can you disassociate from these emotions that are there for a real powerful reason? All of these emotions are baked or linked to anthropology. But am I able to separate myself and look at these things and go, I'm going to be the person that just buys a Hyundai. And I think I have the discipline to figure out the math, and I'm going to separate myself from some of the trappings of concern around what other people think. I can control that. There's certain things I can't control. I can't control the market, but what is in my control is my spending. That is absolutely in my control. And you want to develop a savings muscle. I'm not suggesting that, I'm worried that my oldest, he won't spend any money. I took him to this cool sneakers store this weekend, and I wanted to buy him a cool pair of Nike. He's like, no, it's too much money. I'm like, I'll pay for it. No, you can't do it. And he dresses like shit, and it drives me crazy. And he won't spend any money. He won't spend it. He won't spend a pound. He won't spend any money. And I'm worried he's gonna lose out on some amazing things you can do in your 20s with money. I'm not suggesting you don't go to Taylor Swift or whatever it is young people do nowadays, or occasionally spend a little bit of money on a credit card to stay at a nice place when you're in Thailand or whatever it is. You're only in your 20s once, by all means, have some fun. But at a minimum, you want to develop a savings muscle. I'm going to put $100, $200, $300 a month away no matter what. I'm going to round up to the nearest dollar on acorns. I'm going to find out what matching schemes there are at my employer or with my government, and I'm going to have it taken out of my check. I'm going to opt into all this shit so I never see it, such that it never comes through my hands. Because 99% of people plus will spend every dollar that comes through their hands. I have trouble, I spend all my current income. The way I've gotten wealthy is forced savings for me was equity in the companies I started, or when I signed up for investment plans where it was pulled out of my check. You should assume that every dollar that you have access to, you will spend. That's a safe assumption. So create a series of forced savings when you're young. Time is just such a powerful concept. There's a lot of young people here. I just came from a talk where everyone was about 20 years younger. Everyone has an advantage. What is strategy? Strategy is answering one question. What can you do that's really hard? What are your assets? What are your strengths, your competences? And then what's happening in the marketplace? And strategy is a set of decisions that attempts to cut a swath down the middle of those two things. If you're in your 20s or even your 30s, you have one asset, time. And it sounds basic, but you don't really believe it. For the 300,000 years our species has been on this planet, very few people live past 35. So your brain does not believe you're going to be here past 35. And if you're 28, you're probably going to be here another 70 years. But you really can't process that. But once you start to actually believe it, you should believe the second thing, and talk to anyone over the age of 45 and they'll tell you the following. It is staggering how fast it goes. It literally, you think, well, I don't want to save that kind of money. Oh my God, I can't even imagine that. 30 years, 40 years? Between now and then, I'm going to be a baller, I'm going to win the lottery, I'm going to sell a book, or my company's going to go public. I can't imagine that I might just be me doing the same thing in 40 years. I'm telling you, I was in this audience watching some self-important jerk talk about his wealth yesterday. It was yesterday. Speak to anybody here over the age of 40, and they're going to go, no one ever says, wow, life has gone really slowly. Said no one ever. It's going to go really fast. So the question I put forward is, if you can figure out a way to find $1,000, enter into some sort of scheme where it never goes through your hands, and I have this magic box. And if you put that $1,000 in a magic box at 11% a year, which the market has done since 2008, in 30 years, you're going to have $34,000. So if I give you a magic box and said, if you can figure out a way to put $1,000 in here, and it's going to be 34 like that, and it does feel like that when you get older, how much would you put in? So recognize a flaw in the species is we have no ability to calibrate time, and it's going to go a lot faster than you think. It's the whole thing about compound interest. I bet some of you are new parents. Any new parents here? So when I was a new parent in New York in 2008, I was looking at these really Tony schools downtown. Grace Church, First Presbyterian, because I'm a narcissist, right? I was doing it more for me than them. I don't think any 4-year-old knows where they are during the day. But I wanted to signal, oh, my kids are at Grace Church, because I'm a baller. And I wanted to meet other rich narcissists, right? Just being very transparent here. $62,000 a year, plus in the interview they ask you if you're philanthropic, which is Latin for how much money you're going to give us, on top of your 62 grand. Now, why do you want your kids to go to private school? So they have a greater likelihood of success. Well, what do you mean? What does that give them? Well, it's a competitive economy. We want to afford them any benefit possible, such that they can maybe someday have a house, have kids, not have the economic anxiety that maybe, me and their mom had. You want that for your kids. Well, okay, if you were to send them to a public school, and by the way, there's a lot of research showing the best school you can send your kids to is the school that's closest to where you live. And you take the time they save commuting and invest it in sleep and studying and time with their friends. But assume you're wrong and you screwed up sending them to a public school. If you took that $62,000 and just invested it in a low-cost index fund, and the market you didn't even look at it, but you were really disciplined. All right, it's tuition time, but in this church, I'm putting the 62 grand into SPY for those 14 years. Assume you screwed up, and assume they're not as successful, that they really would have benefited from the contacts and the networking and the Ivy League school they would have got into. You screwed up by sending them to a public school. You can ease your and their pain with the $5.4 million you can give them at 35. $5.5 million will solve a lot of problems. So does it really make sense? And here's the thing at those schools, and I know this firsthand, there's a lot of people that doesn't care. If you have the money and it really doesn't matter, fine, send them to on a risk-adjusted basis, the best school, regardless of what it costs. But I think about half or 2/3 of us that send our kids to private school, it's a real tax on us. It creates a real anxiety in our lives. Oh my God, we got to pay this tuition? Jesus Christ. And then once the kid's in school, you can't pull them out of the school. It creates real anxiety in the household. And what I'm suggesting is people just don't understand the power of time and compound interest. Okay, so we have time, we have Stoicism, then we have time, and then the last component is diversification. And this is really where I screwed up.
One of the thorniest parts of managing people is managing their pay. How often do you end up misaligned with your team? Someone thinks they deserve a raise, but you have a different view. This is where our partner, Personio, comes in. Personio is the all-in-one HR platform you need to scale your business. And they've just released a feature for compensation management. It makes salary reviews so much easier because it ties salaries to performance reviews, which also happen to be handled by Personio. Managers can do stuff like see their allocated budget for promotions and distribute them across their teams. Personio constantly adds new features just like this to make your life easier and your company more successful. You can get set up with them incredibly quickly, which is great if you're time poor. So, if you're leading a growing business and want to offer a better employee experience for less effort, then book a demo at personio.com/secretleaders. That's personio.com/secretleaders. There's a link in the show notes.
I've always made a lot of money. I am remarkably talented. I'm in the top 1%. Easily, right? Now, being in the top 1% of America means you're in the top 0.001% of the world. A lot of my success is not my fault. The smartest thing I ever did was being born a white heterosexual male in 60s California. I came of age of free education that was accessible, and my professional life kicked off during the internet. And I recognize that. I finally recognize that as I've gotten older. But beyond that, right, what are the market dynamics? I came busting out of business school, made a shit ton of money. And 99, I'm worth 20, by the way, I talk in real numbers. I think people, this British and less American notion that you shouldn't talk about money, that's the rich trying to keep you poor. You talk about anything else you want to be good at. Why wouldn't you talk about money? Because I know what every employee at my firm makes. So I tell them, no, you don't talk about your salary. Because the asymmetry of information benefits me. Because if Bob figures out Lisa's making 30% more, you might say, why the fuck is she making 30% more than me? Talk to your friends about their investments. Talk to them about their houses. Talk to them about interest rates. Talk to them about how much money they're making and how much money you're making. If you want to be really good at something, you need to talk about it a lot. So I'm very transparent with money. And boss, by the way, I don't always talk about my wins. I lost $15 million last year shorting the market. I hate it when rich people just talk about their wins all the time. Where was I? Diversification. 99.
Well, you're about to talk real numbers.
What's that?
You're about to talk real numbers.
So 99, I'm worth $20 or $30 million in stock in the companies I've started. I've always been an entrepreneur. I'm looking at jets. I'm flown down to an airport in the middle of Texas to look at a Bombardier or a Gulfstream, right? That was probably, I was self-aware enough even then to go, this is me sticking my chin out to God, looking at jets at the age of 31. This is something's wrong with the universe right now. I remember thinking that, and I was right. And in 2000, the dot-bomb implosion came, and I went from being worth 20 or 30 million to zero, maybe even less than zero. But that was fine. I was single. I didn't have kids. I didn't care. That was like a bad month for me, but then I was fine. But I had several opportunities along the way to sell 2 or 3 million in stock, diversify a bit, and put it in strange, boring shit, Japanese bonds or whatever it might have been. And I would have had a lot of money to fall back on, but I didn't do it. And then what's worse, I did the exact same thing again. I had a company called Red Envelope, which was an e-commerce company that went public in 2002. And I got into a war with the board and the venture capitalists. So I went and I borrowed $3 million against the 10 million in stock I had to buy more Red Envelope stock so I could kick those motherfuckers off my board. And it felt really good when I did. And then when the company, because of the great financial recession and because of the longshoremen strike, a union went on strike at the port of Long Beach and all of our merchandise got stuck 7 miles offshore. And then there was a software glitch at our distribution center in Ohio, and we sent 30,000 gifts to the wrong addresses over the holidays, which is really bad for business. And within 3 weeks, I went from owning 14 million in stock to a chapter 11, and the stock was worth zero, and I still owed the 3 million to the people who had lent me the money, and my oldest son had the poor judgment to come marching out of my girlfriend. And I was broke. And I would say one of the lowest moments I've ever had was in the maternity ward at Langone, NYU Langone. And I was so incredibly nauseous. I could barely stay conscious. And the people taking care of my girlfriend, they had to say to me, just so you know, if you go down, we're not focused on you. We got shit over here. They had to say that to me because they could see how bad I was doing. And they naturally probably thought it was the situation. It was the mechanics of delivery. That wasn't it at all. It was a recognition that the first thought I had when my son was brought into this world, that I had failed as a father. That was so humiliating. And I never had that sensation. I think men, and I think this is a very healthy thing, I think men feel an especially strong onus economically around their obligation to economically provide. By the way, I think that's healthy. I think men should take economic responsibility for their household, which sometimes means getting out of the way and being more supportive of your partner who happens to be better at that money thing than you. But I think it's a good place to start. I do. And by the way, I think most women deep down think it's a good place for you to start too. And I know that sounds sexist, and every piece of research backs it up. And I had failed. I had failed myself, and I had failed my son. And if I had just taken some, if I had just not doubled down, if I had just borrowed the money against the stock and put it in bonds, and then told the bank, sorry, I don't have the stock to pay, I just would have been in such a better place if I just diversified a little, and I still hadn't learned it. And it caused me such unbelievable mental anguish. And now, and I got lucky again, I got very lucky, I started another company, unbelievable bull market, 2008 to 2000 to now. We've never seen a market like this. Never seen a market like this. I bought Netflix at $12 a share, it's at 610, right? Which, by the way, is an intergenerational theft. Well, I'll come back to that. But now I don't have more, I know exactly how much I'm worth. I don't have more than 3.5% in any one thing. Almost anything can happen, almost. And I own Deutsche bonds. I own a piece of an aircraft maintenance facility in El Salvador. I am not going back. I'm running out of time. Diversification is your Kevlar. The one investment I was most excited about, that I thought if I had to pick a 10x, it was this company that's doing text-based preventive healthcare. We sign up big companies, and the employees pay $3. The company pays $3 per employee. They can go on AI-driven on your phone. Here's my rash. This is the rash. Prescription on its way. I just love this company. Tier 1 VC. Lucky to get into the deal. Baller CEO. Bankrupt last week. 0. But here's the thing. It was a bad hour for me, but it wasn't a bad day or a bad week because I have Kevlar. It's called diversification. I can take a bullet to the chest now in any one investment, and it hurts, but I'm fine. I get hit down, and I get back up. Diversification is so incredibly powerful for your own mental well-being and also risk-free adjusted returns. And Daniel Kahneman, who's a role model of mine who died a couple months ago, showed that the happiness you would get from being smart enough to pick NVIDIA 2 years ago and going all in on NVIDIA, I wasn't that smart. The happiness you're going to get from outsized returns is a fraction of the misery you're going to experience from outsized losses from a lack of diversification. So just for your own mental health, as soon as you can, you want to start diversifying. Now, some of you won't have that option. A lot of you are going to have to be very concentrated to buy your first house. You're going to have to borrow money, you're going to have to go all in on a house. Fine. Some of you entrepreneurs, unfortunately, sometimes have no choice but to be very, very concentrated in an asset. You don't have the choice. What I'm saying is the moment you have the choice, you're doing a financing and you might be able to sell some of your stock in a secondary, right? You have some additional capital. You take out a second, right? Well, let's maybe invest it in a different asset, whatever it might be. As soon as you can, once you have assets, start diversifying. Because the markets are cyclical. And you want to have, there's nothing like sleeping fairly well in a down market. It feels really good to be like, yeah, my net worth is down 10%, 20%, fine. Being down 120% of your net worth, and I've been there, makes for really ugly sleep patterns. Diversification is vastly underrated. Focus times the product of Stoicism / discipline, a recognition of time and how fast it'll go, and compound interest, and then diversification. That's essentially, if you really understand and try and apply those things, I think things will work out. And then the context of the atmosphere around all of it is that wealth is what I call a whole person project. What do I mean by that? There's a myth that wealthy people are bad people. And unfortunately, that notion is cemented by some billionaires in their 30s, mostly in the tech industry, who are just not very good citizens. They're strikingly non-impressive, low-character people. And it's cemented this notion that rich people are all like Monty Burns from The Simpsons, lighting cigars with $100 bills and getting the power plant and living alone and just weird, not nice people. The truth is, the majority of wealthy people are high-character people. Because if you want to be really wealthy, you need to create and collect a series of allies along the way. Google just did a study. The hiring manager said when we have a product management position that we advertise, we get 200 CVs within 24 hours. We pick 20 people to come in. 80% of the time, the person we pick has an internal champion that's their friend. People with the most friends have the most professional opportunity. You want to be put in a room of opportunities when you're not physically there. Well, I know Lisa's looking for a job, and I just heard this woman's hiring. I'm going to go talk to her, and I'm going to tell her I have someone great for her. Oh, Bob's starting a business. Business sounds stupid, but we love Bob. Let's put some money in. We love Bob. Right? We love Bob. Right? Generally speaking, wealthy people are really good people. They try to be generous. You need to start making investments in other people and racking and stacking allies. The flip side to that, I've experienced this, is the fastest way to snatch financial victory, financial insecurity from the jaws of financial security is divorce. I lost 60% of my net worth overnight. 50% went to my ex, and 10% more because now we're supporting 2 houses, right? And I can guarantee you that if you ever get divorced, it'll be exactly the wrong time to sell a house. Whenever you're a forced seller, it's just naturally the world says, oh, it's the worst time in the world to sell these stocks, these assets that you need to split. In addition, nothing perverts success like professional divorce. Show me a smaller or medium-sized firm that's actually going really well and it starts coming apart at the seams. It's the partners stop appreciating each other and start being mean or not generous with each other, and there's professional divorce. So if you don't bring a certain amount of generosity and forgiveness and character and love to your personal and professional relationships, you're never going to be that wealthy. Married people, rich people tend to have much higher rates or lower rates of divorce. Really rich people tend to be people that get along even with their ex-business partners. Right? They're generous. Because if you keep a scorecard, and this was one of my biggest flaws in terms of character growing up, I always had a scorecard. Am I getting enough from this girlfriend as I think she's getting from me? Am I getting enough from this friendship, this business relationship, this investment? I'm on a board. Am I making money? And what you realize is that you will instinctively inflate your contribution and diminish theirs. And at some point, you're just going to be upset and angry, and it's going to digress from there. And I finally figured out, at least for me, the approach to life is, what kind of son do I want to be? Not how did my dad treat me? Was he around or not? What kind of son do I want to be? What kind of board member do I want? What kind of investor do I want to be? What kind of spouse do I want to be? What kind of business partner do I want to be? What is my goal? And then that's what I put my behavior to. I put the scorecard away. And I'm just much happier, and I'm a much better partner on a lot of dimensions. Because you will not calibrate the scorecard correctly. And it leads to divorce, professional and personal. Wealth is a whole person project.
One thing you just said on building wealth is about being high character, about building friends, being someone who someone wants to be friends with in the first place. And a lot of that stuff professionally happens in rooms, right? So 2020 happened. The whole world went remote. That's a big cultural shift for generally how people were running businesses. There were a bunch of remote companies, sure, but predominantly people were office-based. And then since then, you've had to sort of phased back, like, are we hybrid? Are we remote? I mean, certainly in my company, Heights, we've gone through exactly this, like fully remote, currently struggling with hybrid. It's a fucking mess. And a lot of people feel this. What's your view on what the right culture, if you were building a company today, like how would you build it culture-wise? And how do you think that works sort of generationally looking forward? So with AI, all of the things over the next 10 years, how do you build a great company culture?
So I have a small company called Prof G Media that does my pods, my books, my TV stuff. It's small, it's about 10 to 12 million a year, but I'm the only shareholder, and the average age is probably 35 because me and my partner are old, but the mean or the median is probably 25 or 26. It's a bunch of overeducated, super ambitious, wonderful young people. 12 of the 14 are in their 20s. I think remote work is a disaster for young people. Now, who's it great for? I think there should be a new classification of worker called the care worker. You have young kids, you have aging parents, you're struggling with your own mental health, or maybe you just don't make enough money to live close to the office, which is a lot of people. You should be classified as a remote worker, and I believe the company has an onus to provide the resources and take additional time to try and evaluate you, despite the fact you're not going to be able to maintain the same level of relationships as people. If you are before you collect dogs and kids, oh my God, get into the office. There are 3 people or more who are eligible for every promotion. And the decider will make their decision, their pick, based on who they have the best relationship with. And relationships are a function of proximity. You're 38% more likely to get a promotion when you're in the office 4+ days a week. In addition, and this is especially true of young men, you need the socialization and the guardrails of the workplace. If I didn't have to be in Morgan Stanley, 515 Figueroa by 8 a.m., if I wasn't there by 9 a.m., it was a paid day off. Things have changed a lot. If I got in at 9:05, it was counted as a paid day off. And I got 20 of those a year, so I was always there by 9, usually by 8. If I didn't have those guardrails, a 22-year-old Scott Galloway would have smoked pot every night. I love pot. Oh my God. I don't think I would have showered that off. I wouldn't have. I used to get pulled out of conference rooms by my VP, Betsy Jacobson, and she'd say, come here. And we'd go into the room, and she'd be like, don't say that. That was stupid. Don't say that again. What? She literally used to say, what the fuck were you thinking? I'd sit there and think, well, I'd much rather be home getting high. But it was really, I needed that. I needed socialization. By the way, I met a former co-founder of my business. I dated people at work. And it was consensual and wonderful. 1 out of 3 relationships begin at work. HR people don't want to talk about this. If you don't know the difference between expressing interest and asking someone for coffee and harassing somebody, you have much bigger problems. I've had 8 marriages at the companies I've started, and I think it's wonderful. Where are young people supposed to meet? Online? That's a disaster. Online dating? Get into the office. Get into the office. Meet mentors, meet friends, meet co-founders. The office is a feature, not a bug. And I realize your lifestyle, it's a strain on your lifestyle. It pays huge dividends because as you get older, remote work is almost necessary. One of the criticisms I had of the book is, okay, this is advice for people in their 20s and 30s. What about their 50s? So I got on the phone with a bunch of them on my podcast, and they outlined the situation. And I talk about getting to your burn, your passive income needs to be your burn. This couple was 48. They want to retire at 60 and da-da-da. They're only going to have, we did the math, they're only going to have $78,000. They need $120,000. They live in San Jose. I'm like, why are you in San Jose? They're like, well, our mother-in-law's here. Our in-laws are here. And I said, I'm like, do you need to be near your in-laws? And they all look at each other, and one's looking at the other, right? Their kids have all moved away. And I'm like, where else have you been that you really like? And they're like, well, we spend a month a year in Costa Rica. I'm like, why wouldn't you move to Costa Rica? You can cut your burn substantially. You can be really happy there. It's got great health care, great food. So remote work is an enormous unlock for caregivers and for people looking to arb down their spend. But for young people, oh my gosh, you want to get into the office. In terms of a culture, one thing I'm trying to do, I was just on the phone with my team now, we don't have an office. So I started Prop G in like 2019. I'm a narcissist, so I got this gigantic space in Soho because I want my friends to think I'm a baller and it's big and beautiful. And it cost $80,000 a month. And yeah, rookie move, right? I keep making them. And then COVID came along, and I had this epidemiologist on my podcast, and I called him and I said, how bad is this? And he said, Scott, it's worse than anyone thinks. I remember them saying that. I'm like, I didn't believe any of the thing about I was like, oh no, I'm not worried about this. He was like, oh no, it's worse than anyone thinks. So I called LVMH, who I was subleasing from, and I said, I want to give it back. And they said, well, you're going to lose a year of deposit. I wrote them a check. I forego $1 million, and I got out of the lease. 4 years later, it was the smartest thing I've ever done. Now the problem is, how do these kids get together, and how do you develop a form of a culture? One, I tell them they can have a co-working space whenever they want. And what's interesting is the youngest people who supposedly love remote work, they immediately get co-working space, immediately. I like that, no deposit, no security deposit, it's not that expensive. I think it's 18 or 22 grand a month, it's not a lot of money. And I say to them, okay, anytime any 4 of you are together, and you can only do this with a small firm, it's not realistic. Anytime any 4 of you are together, you have my credit card. I don't care if it's at a Broadway show, in Tulum, or in 3 weeks they're going to St. Bart's, they just told me. And they like each other and they get along. And it's selfish of me because the number one source of retention in companies, people think it's compensation. Well, that's actually number 3. Number 2 is if they think they're learning and they're getting some sort of psychic compensation. The number one predictor of retention, does anyone know what it is? If you have a friend at work. So I'm like, it's my job to make them friends. So they all interview each other. We don't hire anyone unless everyone says, yeah, I'd like to hang out with this person. They like them. And you can only do that in a small company. That doesn't scale well. And they do the most amazing shit together. They have a ton of fun together because it's on me. They make really good money, but they can't afford to go to St. Bart's. In the last 3 years, they've gone to LA, last 18 months, LA, St. Bart's, this June, Tulum, Cannes. Oh, we're coming with you to Cannes. There's 3 of us who want to come. All we need is a 4th, and we'll see you in Cannes. And I'm sincere about this. They have my card as long as they're together. And I think it's working. I think they genuinely like each other and they love the firm. Now, granted, my firm's a little bit different. I'm rounding third. I get a crazy amount of money to do talks and books and stuff like that, so I can afford this sort of thing. But we have never lost a person voluntarily. No one has ever voluntarily left the firm. So, and I think that's kind of the key. I'm getting into a little bit for HR. But generally what you find, and this is not a hallmark moment, when you have a small company, 10% of your employees add 120% of the value and the rest are negative 20%. And you need to identify those 10% and nail them to the floor. Right? Ignore how old they are, ignore their background, ignore what they look like, and it's not easy because we all have stereotypes. And if this 23-year-old former diver from Yale who just seems smarter than anyone here and works around the clock, oh hi, I'm going to give you 10% of the company. This is my plan. I'm going to build this company for 7 years. I'm going to sell it for 100 to 200 million. With dilution, that means you're going to get 7 to 10 million. Are you in? Okay. Find those 2 or 3 people, or those 10 people, the 10% who drive the 120%, so they can minimize the negative 20 of everyone else you need to scale. And by the but everyone has a role. Okay, fine. There is a small number of people at firms that drive the majority of the value, and you want to massively overcompensate those people. You want to look them in the eye and go, I'm focused on me, but if me does well, you're going to do well. And this is how I can guarantee that. And you are going to do better than your parents did 20 years younger than them. I'm very Darwinian about it. I want to have a nice work environment. I want them to learn. My assumption is the majority of people go to work for economic security for them and their families. And what I tell them is I'm going to get you to economic security faster than anywhere. And that might not be the right way, it's my way. And I'm very much focused on those individuals. Retention is job number one. Finding good people, ringing the register, but I do think in a small company that has a good product, everything is about retention. Identifying those people early and just knowing they're not going anywhere because they could never do better than where they're doing here.
I mean, that is a fucking baller move as well. The card, not everyone can do that, but I think if you put yourself in a position because of wealth, because of following all these techniques, I guess one of the things you're trying to minimize in your age, if you don't mind my mentioning.
Sure, I'm 49.
Thank fuck, I was about to say 59. God, I would have really screwed that up.
I'm turning 60 in 5 months.
Because I'm sure one of the things you optimize for is, sorry about that. Yeah. But I'm sure one of the things you optimize for is fucking chilling out a bit. Not having to deal with the employee churn, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore there's a big tax that you're mentally paying every time you have to sort that out, which money can solve for you, right? And that's a really nice model and framework to use for money. It's is it making your life easier? Are you building a SaaS or venture-backed business? Or are you just trying to grow internationally? Well, if potential customers or investors haven't already asked you about ISO 27001, SOC 2, or GDPR compliance, they probably will soon. Achieving compliance can unlock major growth for your company, but the process is often time-intensive and costly. This is where our partner, Vanta, can help. Vanta automates up to 90% of compliance work, getting you audit ready in weeks instead of months and saving you significant costs. Plus, Vanta scales with your business, helping you successfully enter new markets, land bigger deals, and earn customers' trust. As a special offer, Secret Leaders listeners get 20% off Vanta when they go to vanta.com/secretleaders. That's VANT.com/secretleaders for 20% off. There's a link in the description.
That is you're tapping into that's the correct question, because this is what money gets you. And that is, money is a means, it's not the ends, right? I got to my number. Everyone, you have your number, what you really like to have.
What was your number?
Well, it was $1 million when I was your age. Then it became 10, then it became 100. Because I had different things in my mind. Well, I'd like to have a nice home. Well, how much do I need for a nice home? Well, only $1 million. Well, no, now it's 10 million. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd really like 2 homes. Well, I'd really like a Gulfstream.
You want a nice divorce?
I kept going up and up. And that's the problem with money, is it's quantified by a number, and you can always imagine more. And what you have to realize, and it takes some discipline, and this is a high-class problem, is to realize it's the ink in your pen, and that is it'll write different chapters, it can make certain chapters burn brighter, but it's not your story. All studies show that the key to happiness, one, let me be clear, money can buy happiness. The bullshit money can't, that's bullshit, money can't buy happiness. Middle income people are happier than poor people, high income people are happier than middle income. That's the bad news. The good news is it's diminishing returns. Once you get to a certain point of wealth, once you get above, say, $1 million a year, which is a lot of money, but once you get above that, going to 2 or 3 million, very little marginal return. So you have to figure out, what's my number? And if you're fortunate enough to get there, what I think the ends is, the whole point of economic security, is such that you can have an absence of anxiety, so you can focus on relationships, and then you transfer that money you have into time and attention to your relationships. I can't imagine a bigger failure, and I was this way. I was more concerned with what other people thought of me than the people who I was living with thought of me. I wanted fame, I wanted relevance, I wanted success, and I realized in my 30s, but the people really close to me, they like me, but they don't love me as much as strangers. I mean, okay, I need to recalibrate my life. Having money is, I hit my number, I still think about money a lot, but I'm not going to hoard wealth. I've decided I'm going to, above my number now, I'm going to spend it all or give it all away. I don't believe in billionaires. More power to them. I don't think we should take their money away. I don't think they're any happier than me. I just don't. So what money is now is I have an absence of economic stress. I still have it kind of deep down, but I know I just need to be rational and it disappears because I grew up without no money, so it's still there for me. But I do amazing things with my wife and kids. I give money to things I love. I help friends out. I'm doing a ton of virtue signaling now. And I don't give money away. I don't give money away because I'm a good person. It makes me feel really fucking masculine. It makes me feel like a baller. I love it. And I don't give money away anonymously. I show up and I cut ribbons and and it makes me feel really good about myself. And I think that's okay. It makes me feel strong like bull. I think that's okay. But once you get to a point of some economic security, the whole point is you can then double down on what every study shows is the key to happiness, and that is deep and meaningful relationships. I'm catching up. I'm spending a ton of time with my boys. Right? I'm taking the dogs and my son to Estelle Manor, whatever the fuck it's called, and I'm setting up shooting and all these stupid things and padel, and you know, he's doing a cooking class and I'm doing a cooking. He's 13. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And I couldn't do these things. Money's an incredible lubricant for a lot of things. But if you don't use it when you have it to cement and really go deep on relationships, what is the point? The biggest tragedy, and I thought about this a lot, is to end up at the NYU Langone President's Circle floor. If you give Langone, it's probably gone up, but 10 years ago, if you gave $250,000 to NYU Langone, you got a secret number. And anything happens to you, you call the secret number and they're like, oh, you have COVID? We're sending the world's greatest pulmonologist over to your house in 5 minutes. It's this dirty secret, right? Rich people have much better care. Most people know that. I don't think they know the extent. And then they have this floor where you go to give birth and die. It feels like a Four Seasons. It literally feels like a Four Seasons. It's beautiful. It doesn't feel like a hospital. And I thought, this is my biggest fear. I get there and I'm dying and I'm surrounded by strangers, right? All these people that don't know me are super impressed and pretend to like me, but the people who are supposed to love me don't show up. That is failure. That is failure. And it sounds remote, but if you are so obsessed and provide the commitment to make money, it is easy to get on a treadmill where you start ignoring the really important relationships in your life. You start sacrificing and you never bust out of that cycle. And you end up in your 40s and your 50s with a shitty relationship with your spouse. You're not spending as much time caring for your parents as you would like to, or you don't reciprocate the amount of concern they showed for you. Your friends are sort of professional friends. They're not real friends. I mean, they're friends, but once you're no longer in a position of economic relevance, they don't really love you, right? That is failure. That is snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. So I purposefully have decided I'm going to spend it all. I don't want my kids to inherit a lot of money. They'll be fine. And all my money goes towards cementing relationships. I'm a yes to everything. Any friend calls me and says, hey, we're going to Stagecoach. What's Stagecoach? Well, it's the new Coachella. It's country music. I hate country music. I'm in. And my right is I can always say no. I have the right to always back out, but I'm a yes to anything with friends or people I care about. My kid asked me to do anything, I'm a yes. I have the right to back out. But this qualifies as a good problem, but keep in mind, money is just the means. The ends are deep and meaningful relationships. That's a word salad.
Most entrepreneurs obviously have a certain type of way they build wealth, right? So you've talked a lot about the strategies that normal, logical people who aren't fucking idiots and go all in on companies would do. But for a lot of us, it's like feast and famine, right? You either did make a lot of money or you didn't or whatever. So in those circumstances, there can be a number and a moment. I guess I'm wondering, do you actually have a number?
I did, yeah.
No, but do you have advice in 2024?
Yeah.
And just swap dollars for pounds or whatever?
Yeah.
How much does someone need to make on an exit to be financially free for the rest of their life? And can you break down your maths?
Well, it's just situational. You might decide my goal is to live in the British countryside and have a modest home and live well and be able to take vacations, and I have one kid and my husband works, so you just do the math. Assume you're going to make between 7 and call it 9% a year. The definition of rich is the following: passive income that's greater than your burn. and I'll give you two examples. I have a close friend who runs the M&A group at a large, iconic investment bank. He makes between 4 and 14 million a year, depending on the market. Between his ex-wife, his alimony, his child support, his 3 current kids, his master of the universe lifestyle, his 54% tax rate, his FlexJet card, and all the trappings to signal that he's a baller, and also a feeling that he should be a baller, given how hard he's working and advising the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world, I don't think he saves a lot of money. He's poor. And I can tell you that I know this firsthand, he is really stressed about what happens if the music stops. Really stressed. That is not rich. My father, who's turning 94 in 3 months, between his Royal Navy pension, he was a frogman jumping into the North Atlantic with the Royal Navy at the age of 17. Can you imagine that? And he gets a pension for doing that. And Social Security, he's lived in America for 60 years, and he owns 11 washing and drying machines at trailer parks where he goes every day to collect the quarters. He makes $52,000 a year in passive income, and he spends 48, and he's happy. His passive income is greater than his burn. He's rich. My dad is so painfully cheap. He's that guy every Friday. His big treat is he goes out for Mexican food with his health aide. And he orders a frozen margarita and he drinks half of it and he gets the rest to go. He takes home half of a frozen margarita and puts it in the freezer, and there's all these like weird gelatinous margaritas from that. Anyways, he's that guy. He's rich. Working is totally optional for him. So your number is just a function of where you think your burn needs to be. And some people don't need a lot of money, and some people need a lot of it. But think about, realistically, what would my burn need to be at a certain age? What are my sources of income? And assume a certain return on your nest egg based on traditional returns, and just do the math. And then if the math isn't there, well, then you need to adjust down what your burn's going to be. And there's all sorts of ways to do that. A lifestyle arbitrage, moving to a different neighborhood, whatever it might be. Or you might have to work longer, or you might need to get more serious about savings right now. No, saving $800 a month isn't enough. You need to figure out a way to save $1,100 a month. You can do the math. The advantage you have in your 40s and 50s is the landing lights are on. You're not going to retire at 65. Assume you're going to make money till you're 70. The landing lights are on. You can start doing the math. What does this cost us? And then the other thing that people don't talk about is it's so important you have alignment with your partner. What's the number one cause of divorce? By the way, 70% of divorce filings are filed by women. 70% by women. And what's the number one source or cause for why they file for divorce?
I'm guessing it's not friends again.
Insufficient capital.
It's money. It's money. It's usually when the male has had a financial breakdown, a bankruptcy, has lost his business, or some sort of mental breakdown, right? And you hear that and you're like, oh wait, I thought all women were just wonderful people and all men were predators. There is still a standard expectation in relationships that once a male is no longer a provider, he becomes much less attractive to his mate. Men are 3 times as likely to take ED drugs when their wife starts making more money than them. The likelihood of divorce doubles the moment the female in the relationship starts making more money. Isn't it uncomfortable to hear this shit? And here's the thing. As long as you have alignment, you're fine. My wife worked at Goldman Sachs, and it was a huge source of relief for me because I was starting a business and we had alignment. She was going to work her ass off because I wasn't making any money. And then when the kids got to a certain age, I was going to take over financially. We had alignment. We have a similar approach to spending. We have alignment. You want to talk about divorce that's just so frustrating. It's when one person has a different expectation around the economic weight class you should be in, a different expectation around who's responsible for putting you and keeping you in that economic weight class, and what can break up a marriage really fast is a different approach to spending. Do you know how many really ugly arguments are around misalignment around spending? So young people, right, what do you need to be successful in a marriage? One, I think sex and affection. It says you're singular. Young people figure that out. That's very important to them. The second is values. Religion, where are we going to live? What's our approach to kids, child rearing, all that stuff. Young people don't talk a lot about that. And then the third thing, and the number one cause of divorce in marital agita, and young people never talk about it with the romantic partner because it feels sort of uncomfortable and very unsexy, is money. Where do we expect to live? Where do you expect to live? How much is it going to cost us to live there? Who's responsible for making that money? These conversations are really hard, but alignment with a partner, and I'm not saying you have to start out, but one of the most wonderful things about, it's great being wealthy, but I actually think the most rewarding thing was getting wealthy and building it with a partner. That was just so nice to it's like raising kids and the kid works out. To build something with a partner is hugely rewarding, right? Anyways, alignment, and it's not too late. Sit down with your partner. I find especially men don't want to talk about money with their spouses. They go, leave it to me. And by the way, a lot of times I think spouses, men and women, where you really come off the tracks is unwelcome surprises. You need to tell your spouse when you've lost a lot of money in the market. You need to have real transparency. I sit down with my partner once every 3 months and go through everything. This is where we lost money, this is where we made money, right? I'm much more risk aggressive. If we're up to her, we'd be bearing Krugerrands in the yard. She's much more risky, and the combination works really well. But something we don't talk about with young people in terms of mating is how important it is to get alignment around money. It's not, you don't have to be exactly the same, but at least be honest with each other.
Final one from me, then we'll do some quick Q&A.
Yep.
So, obviously, not shy of a hot take. Very informed with data and spanning lots of different categories and stuff. You've got a platform. You've got opinions. Is there anything off limits? Is there stuff that you're like, without your, SVP taking you to another room and saying, what the fuck are you doing? Are there things that you're just like, look, I should not get involved in this. Like, this is not a Prof G thing. Or are there, is your view that sort of anything's on the table if you've got informed opinions?
Well, in office hours where people call in, a lot of times people call in who I think are struggling with their mental health or with something medical, and I try to be more responsible and say, I'm just not qualified to comment here. And I'm going to try and get you some resources, but I don't have a degree in clinical psychology. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm trying to be more measured. Here's the problem. There's this Dunning-Kruger effect, where if you're really good at one thing, you immediately assume you're an expert in anything. And it's just not true. I should not be talking to people about, health treatment. I should not be trying to diagnose depression. I can recognize depression in other people if I'm going through it. I suffer with depression and anger, and I can say, this is what I'm struggling with, and it sounds like you might be struggling with it. Here's some resources to call. But I try not to prescribe or tell people what to do around health-related issues, because I know I don't have any domain expertise there. I talk about my kids a lot. I don't talk about my partner a lot because she's threatened me with violence if I say anything about it. She wants that part of our life separate.
And your kids haven't threatened that yet?
It's funny, my kids are now just figuring out what I do. They're constantly like, my friend's dad says you're great. What do you do again? They just have no idea what I do. No idea. It's nice, I like that. It's nice.
So I do have one last one actually.
Yeah?
Very important, because you talk a lot about your kids, and you talk about your parents.
Yep.
And you mentioned earlier this generational idea of wealth.
Right.
This sort of like bank robbery. What are you referring to? What is this great robbery that's taken place in generational wealth?
Super easy. My generation has fucked yours. The greatest intergenerational theft has occurred over the last 40 years. The average 70-year-old is 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago. The average person under the age of 40 is 24% less wealthy. And we use words like network effects or globalization. It's been a purposeful transfer. What are the two largest tax deductions? I know this is true in the US, I know this is true in the UK. Mortgage interest rate and capital gains. Who owns homes? And who owns stocks? People my age. Who rents and makes their money from current income? People your age. Every year in the United States, we transfer $1.4 trillion from young people to old people, the wealthiest generation in the history of the planet, old Americans, called Social Security. Shouldn't old people who've had an unprecedented level of prosperity be responsible for giving young people money? Makes no sense to me. Oh, a virus kills 1 million people, that'd be bad. But what would be tragic is if I lost money. So we put $6 trillion into the economy, 80% of it wasn't spent. It wasn't spent on medicine or food. It was put in people's savings accounts. So what do? They invest in stocks and bonds, which sent assets skyrocketing. So my assets went boom, because I already own a home in stocks. But if you're looking for a house, or you're just coming into your prime income earning years and want to buy stocks, how do you get your shot? The reason I got wealthy is because in 2008, we let the economy crash. We bailed out the banks, but we didn't bail out the economy. And I was just coming into my prime income earning years, starting to make real money, even though my life had gone to shit. I was still making a lot of money. And I took all my money and I bought Apple, Amazon, and Netflix for $6, $8, and $12 a share. And now they're at $160, $180, and $600. But we decided we're not going to let assets crash this last time. Disruption and market cycles are key to the... There's this myth that's been fomented that you have bought, and it's a lie, and that is strong markets and high asset prices are good for everybody. There are two parts to your life. There's the investing, where you're trying to make more money than you're spending so you can save and invest. How many of you are in the investing part of your life? Then there is, I'm spending more than I'm saving because I'm a little bit older. I'm in the harvesting part of my life. How many of you are in the harvesting part? Okay. If you're in the investing part, you want asset prices to crash. Strong markets aren't good for you. You want prices as low as possible. How on earth are you ever going to afford a home in London? How are you? What, you're going to buy Nvidia at $800 a share and hope it goes to 8,000? So when we bailed out the baby boomer owner of a restaurant in New York, all we were doing was robbing opportunity from the 26-year-old graduate of a culinary academy that wanted her shot. So the entire market is rigged to take money from a younger generation to an older generation. My tax rate the last 10 years has been 17%. What's your tax rate? The richest 25 Americans paid an average tax rate of 16%. Corporations are paying the lowest tax rate since 1939 in America. It used to be 3.5% of GDP corporate taxes, now it's 1%. But if you're a super earner, you make more than, say, 100 or 150,000 pounds, you and your husband or you and your wife, up to $1 million or $1.5 million, but you earn it. It's not from ownership, it's from your taxes have never been higher. There is a myth that the rich don't pay taxes. Actually, the rich pay almost all the taxes. The nuance, though, is it's the super earners, the workhorses. Dad's a chiropractor. He's got a little chiropractic clinic. He makes $200,000-300,000 pounds a year. He's doing great. Mom is a baller, partner in a law firm, making $600,000-800,000 pounds a year. They make $1 million pounds a year. Their tax rate is probably 50%. But if you own assets, your tax rate plummets. So it's the super rich and corporations that are not paying their fair share, but the super earners, the people with good jobs who earn a lot of money, are paying enormous tax rates. And this is nothing but a transfer of wealth from the young to the old. Almost every economic policy we have is a transfer of wealth from your generation to mine. COVID was the ultimate generational theft, but all of the biggest tax policies are and it makes sense. Look who's running for president of the United States. Look how old they are. The former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, when she had her first child, Castro had just declared martial law in Cuba, and 2/3 of households didn't have a color television. But she's supposed to understand the challenges facing a 17-year-old girl who's 5'9", 95 pounds, getting extreme dieting tips and notifications from Meta. She's supposed to understand that. These elected officials, Mitch McConnell at 82, are supposed to understand the challenges of a 23-year-old male with no economic or romantic prospects who keeps getting notifications on his gaming app from Kevin Hart and Charles Barkley that he should bet on the Chelsea game. They really understand the threats and challenges facing young people. The average age of an American is 38. The average age of our elected representative is 62. And they keep voting, seniors keep electing other seniors who keep voting themselves more money. You want to talk about really screwing young Americans? I apologize if all my data is about America. Student debt. It's the only debt in America that's not dischargeable by bankruptcy. Shouldn't it be the most dischargeable debt? if a young person screws up and trusts me and pays $72,000 a year to come to NYU and they end up with $150,000 in debt, and they're one of the people that's not cut out for college, oh no, you own your debt for the rest of your life. University doesn't have to pay it back, it's backed by the government. Every major fiscal policy across, in my opinion, not Northern Europe, but Western Europe and America, is nothing but a thinly veiled con job to get me more money from you. It is, all the protests on campus in the US, I was just on Pierce Morgan, they got nothing to do with the Middle East. None of these people have any fucking idea what's going on there. They couldn't name anyone in the PLA or any of the leaders of Hamas. They don't even know what countries border Gaza. It's not about the Middle East, it's about America. They're enraged. And any cut to the system turns into an opportunistic infection because they're enraged, they're angry. And I don't blame them. I'd be pissed off. Any opportunity to be really pissed off, I would take if I was a young person in the UK or America right now. There's prosperity everywhere, everywhere. When I was 25, inflation-adjusted basis, average salary $85,000. 20 years ago, it was 65. Now it's 55 for 25-year-olds. But meanwhile, housing has gone up fourfold and education's gone up twofold. What the actual fuck? But the economy has boomed and the stock market's touching all-time highs. And I get 210 notifications a day, the majority of which are people vomiting their wealth on me. And what do you know? What do you know? The young generation in Britain and the US is the most anxious, depressed, obese, and addicted in history. I literally can't figure out what is this all for, right? Innovation, AI, GDP growth, IPOs. If our kids are obese, depressed, and addicted, what is any of this about? It's like, I think about this, I'm like, have we lost our fucking minds? Your kids? You know, most of you don't have kids, but I think about, can you imagine, I think about, if I didn't have money and I was sending my kids into this world of prosperity, were they going to be so fucking depressed? It's criminal. It's literally criminal. This is the jet lag speaking. I'm emotional. Sorry about that. Let's talk about something brighter.
Well, maybe it's brighter, maybe it's not, but what is your advice to entrepreneurs then in the room and listening who might actually be able to make a change? We all believe that we can make change, right? That's the whole fucking point of entrepreneurship in the first place. So what can we do? What can we do to actually create a better world? Because all of those things that you have listed there are insidious, but part of Stoicism is living in reality, right? And that is something that you are, as a philosophy that you practice. So how do we live in reality and also create a better world? What is your advice for us to actually make change?
Well, it sounds very trite, but vote. Get more politically engaged. Young people don't vote for some reason. I think a lot of the onus comes down to my generation just being less selfish. I think we have to have economic programs to transfer money back to young people. We screwed all this up, we can unscrew it. There's nothing I'm talking about that can't be fixed. Tax policies that favor the young instead of the old, child tax credit, national service that helps young people meet other people, potential mentors, friends. I think there's a child tax credit, universal child care, just basics that help young adults out. I think there's a ton of things we can do. I think young people are pretty socially minded. I think you have an onus to be economically viable. Take the temperature down, get off of social media. It's total empty calories. It'll just make you depressed and angry. Use it for your own companies to get your word out, but I got off of Twitter a year ago, and it's probably the most accretive thing I've ever done for my mental health. But I do think the onus is on my generation we're the ones in power. You're more powerful than most people your age because you're young and you have digital platforms. But the real power is in corporations and people my generation. So I think we have an onus to change things. And I'd like to think people are waking up to it. But young people, just be successful and vote. Take the temperature down. Don't do what I did. Don't feel like you have to get back in someone's face if they say something mean about you on social media. That's just stupid. You know what the best revenge is? I struggle with anger. I get really angry at people. I hold grudges. And one of my mentors said something so powerful to me about 15 years ago that changed my life. He said, you really, I was at a war with my board, and he's like, you really want to serve this guy a cold lunch? I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna. He's like, if you really want revenge, he's like, just live an amazing life. Just live an amazing life. He's like, love as many people as you can, have as many people love you, make a shit ton of money, spend it on fun things, and everyone that you hate is just literally gonna fade. Don't even think about them. And it's gonna drive them crazy when they see what a nice life you're having. And that kind of changed my life. I'm like, what am I doing? Being angry at people. I've been in business 35 years. I've never sued anyone nor been sued. If someone treats me poorly, I just don't work with them again. But this all started with what can you do? Take the temperature down in social. Never respond to a slight. The world's going to be fine if it's a little bit out of balance, if someone gets the best of you. And vote. Get very politically active.
Scott, it's been amazing.
Thank
you
you
so much. Good time for a couple of Q&A? Okay, so we do have pizzas and beers upstairs, so I won't keep everyone from them for too long, but we'll take time for 3 questions, okay? So first hand up, very, very eager. Imogen, yes, I saw your hand. Go for it, you first.
Please stand up and introduce yourself. That's my trick to make sure people are nicer to me.
Hi, my name's Imogen. I was founder of a company that I sold last year, which is why I'm about to ask questions.
Congratulations.
Thank you. For people starting their investing journey, what would you advise is the best way to learn about financial markets, and also rating kind of asset classes? What do you think of wealth managers and also angel investments, like in kind of startups?
Angel investing is the worst asset class in the world. Angel investing should be relegated to what I call FIPS, formally important people. And that is people who have so much money they can lose it all, because it is the worst asset class. Because even if the company does well, if you're not sitting on a fund, it's very difficult to defend your position. And the infant mortality rate across small companies is just really, really high. If you get psychic income from it and you want to help young people, then fine. But expect the only return you will get will be psychic, not right off the money. Whenever I invest in a really early stage company, I think of it as a gift and money that's going into the universe. And I don't ever expect to get any money back, and it almost never lets me down. Ring fence, have your fun. I call that fun. Angel investing, picking stocks, thinking that you understand the market. Ring fence it, 10, 20%, maybe 30%, but try and keep it to 10 or 20%. Anyone on CNBC, any financial manager, anyone with a logo, a website is a grifter. My industry, I work with the smartest financial people in the world. I know the smartest PE, the smartest VCs. As in aggregate, they have underperformed the market by the amount of their fees. Take as much money as you can and put it in low-cost index funds. And if you have more than, do you mind my asking me your age?
35.
Okay, so you're a kid. You're going to be around another 70 years, most likely working at least another 40 years. If you made more than $100,000 in your outcome and you put that in low-cost index funds, when you're my age, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Don't get seduced by private wealth managers or going into weird investments. Low-cost index funds, MSC World, SPY. I still think America is more up and to the right than anywhere in the world. Britain, 7 to 10 IPOs are underwater in the last 10 years. Apple's worth more than the entire FTSE. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with this country. Anyway. Low-cost index funds, low-fee index funds. Vanguard, have some fun. Talk yourself into believing you can identify good companies and good stocks, and then figure out that you don't, but that'll be a good life lesson at your age. And put all the rest in low-cost index funds. And then call me in 25 years and thank me.
Henry.
Hey Scott, Henry Mason. You kind of alluded to that, what the fuck is wrong with this country? You're clearly living here. Just curious, you said a lot of the data was US focused.
Yeah.
A lot of your life has been Just what are some of the observations that you have between difference, both
Yeah.
in founder mentality and all this?
So my very reductive analysis and advice to young people is that America is the best place to make money and Europe is the best place to spend it. The quality of life here is just incredible. You can get an amazing $8 bottle of wine in Spain. There's nothing like Premier League football. We don't have anything like that in the US. Nothing like it. It really is amazing. For making money, my observation of London is that no one actually makes money, they just service other people's money. That it's a butler economy. That the majority of wealth here is high net worth managers or restaurateurs or hoteliers or people who are offering concierge medical services to really rich people who made their money somewhere else. It's strange how little organic wealth creation I've observed in the UK. And I can't figure it out because you have all the trappings. You have amazing universities. You have an incredible culture. I don't know if it's a lack of risk take. I don't know what it is. But whenever I meet someone that's wealthy, they made it somewhere else, or they're taking 1% of someone else's wealth who made their money somewhere else. Or they opened the hottest sushi place in Marylebone or whatever, right? But I would say, I'd like to think things are changing. Like I might start investing some money in VC. By the way, do as I say, not as I do. I might be getting angel investor. Because you get a 30% tax break. I mean, it feels like the UK is trying. So on a pure capitalist level, I'm disappointed, surprised at the downside in the UK. I don't understand why there's not more organic value creation. On a personal side, it's really nice. So I don't know if you've heard, but America's a strange place right now. But I'll give you an example. A free gift with purchase for me, I moved here 2 years ago. Assault weapons, a woman's bodily autonomy, trans rights. It's not even a discussion here. It's like, well, of course we don't have assault weapons, right? It's not even a discussion. Trans people? Well, I don't know. Leave them the fuck alone. We're not, okay. We don't need to understand it. But we're not going to demonize them, right? A woman's right to terminate a pregnancy? There are states now in the United States where you have to leave the state. So all these, what I'll call societal benefits, that is here. It's alive and it's well. I find the discourse is less coarse here. People don't say, I mean, you guys are snarky and you're kind of mean in a funny way, but it's nothing like the U.S. where, like, do you know in the U.S. a third of people are speaking to their neighbors less than they were 20 years ago based on their political affiliation? 52% of Democrats are worried their kid's going to marry a Republican. It's gotten very ugly in the U.S. So I love it here from a lifestyle standpoint. My advice to anyone who is very serious about making money, it sounds terrible, is if you have the opportunity to go to America, you're going to get to letter D or L 30% faster. In the US, I find the attitude is, I don't like your idea, sorry, nice to meet you. Or, I like your idea, let's start making money together. Let's get on it. Here, every meeting I have is a very polite maybe. I'm headed out to the Cotswolds, let's meet in a month. I was like, why? How did that go? I don't know. I'm not sure how that went. It also just might be a cultural thing. I just might not fit here. I haven't figured out a way to make money here. I don't need to, so that's nice. But this is a place, I think England is like Australia. I think it's where you come to spend your money. I don't, and I know a lot of people make a lot of money here. I'm with a really talented group of entrepreneurs. You would think at some point, if you look at very globally, America in the 80s was about 26% of GDP. I think it's still 26%, and there's been a huge increase in global wealth, and we've registered that. China's gone from like 5 to 16, and the 11 points of share that have been hemorrhaged have come from Europe. Europe's been the big loser globally. Asia's been the biggest winner. America's held its own, and all that Asian growth has come at the cost of Europe. So these are huge issues that obviously that nations are having to tend with. The UK hasn't grown in 5 years. You're the only European nation that hasn't grown in 5 years. So, look, I love living here. I love the culture, love the people. Jesus Christ, the weather's awful. But the difference is, I don't know how to summarize it other than there seems to be just a lack of organic value creation. I've had so many people from Cambridge tell me that they invented AI. And I'm like, who cares? You didn't make any money off of it. Okay, good for you. Tell your grandkids. Tell your grandkids. But this is such an existential question, and I get this question a lot, and I don't have a good answer. But I've been underwhelmed by the business environment here.
It's almost like as if talking about Brexit for 10 years wasn't productive. It's weird. Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions. Mike, yes.
Hey, Scott, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Mike.
Thoughts. So one thing I'm trying to kind of reconcile, I've kind of like hung on a lot of words that you've said, is this almost delayed gratification of I don't want to say delayed gratification of happiness, but specifically this investment into your people, into your family. And the bits I'm picking up on are you saying that you don't regret not seeing your kids grow up and the failure of your first marriage, but now you have money, the only thing you want to spend your money and time on is investing in those relationships. And the thing that makes me interesting is seeing people on this path of suppressing their happiness in today for something in the future that either don't make their number or don't have the discipline to get off of the hedonic adaptation to then enjoy it. What would you say to that kind of working out the net present value of your happiness and finding that balance in knowing when enough is enough?
Yeah, so it's not like I ignored everyone until they were out of the house. It wasn't that bad. But look, you can have it all. The way I would summarize is the following. You can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. And recognize that if you I wanted to be able to spend a lot of time with my kids as they got older. I wanted to have a lack of economic anxiety as I got older. So I recognized that would involve trade-offs when I was younger. And I'm not saying that's the right way to go about it. Some people are like, no, I'm going to enjoy my 20s and 30s. Fine, but you're not going to enjoy your 40s and 50s as much as I am. So it's just an honest and open conversation. It's a sober conversation with yourself and with your partner. And by the way, you can move to a lower cost neighborhood. I left New York because I couldn't afford it. I had an honest conversation with my partner. I'm like, the life we want to lead, we can't afford. We were making, again, I like to talk about money. We were making $800,000 combined income. And we couldn't afford to live the life we wanted in New York. Our rent was $18,000 a month. Our kids' schooling was going to be $125,000 a year. I'm like, okay. So $500,000 or $600,000 pre-tax is going to our rent and our kids' tuition? I mean, Florida, here we come. It was a sober conversation, and we had a much nicer life, right? So I think it's just recognizing that life is trade-offs. And I think if you're young and single and trying to make it, when you're young, you can dance between the raindrops. You can live in a shitty apartment. All you really need is friends and alcohol, and you can have a pretty good time. As you get older, you really do need more economic security. And once you need kids, you absolutely do need some economic. So I just think it's an honest conversation with yourself and your partner around the trade-offs you're willing to make. And I don't know if I look back, would I probably give some of my money back to have more time with my kids when they were really young? Probably, but you don't get to make those choices in hindsight. I don't know. I don't know if I have it. I don't know if I have the right balance. Maybe I'm trying to justify the way I did it. But the only thing I know is that you need to have an honest conversation with yourself and your partner around the trade-offs required to get to where you expect to be. And I worry some people are setting themselves up for huge disappointment and strain on the relationship when they don't really have an honest conversation around expectations, where we need to live the lifestyle based on what your expectations are in terms of commitment to the family and time at home and things like that. I was working around the clock. I mean, literally around the clock. I'm not there are some people who are in great shape, great relationship with their family, good spouses, make a ton of money, donate time to the ASPCA, and have a food blog. Assume you are not that person. Anyway, starting out not for a better answer. You can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. That's what I've found.
Thank you. We've got a final question here from Rod on the front row. Stand up, Rod.
Hey, Rod.
For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm sometimes known as the Rod Father, but that's probably because I'm older than you. But I would like to say, and I'm not sure if anyone would agree, you taught me a lot.
Thanks for that.
And back in the day when you were just a marketer and I was in marketing, in fact, he was really a marketer too. You taught us a lot about marketing, and then you've kind of evolved. 3 times a week you're in my ears, and you've taught me a lot about life and a lot about business and a lot about investing. Thank you very much.
Thank
You've
you.
done very well on your punts. But I want to talk about learning though, because I do pay you as every year to be a member of Section.
Oh, thanks.
And Section, I think, for those people who don't know, is like sort of pocket-size MBA courses that you can pick up in the scope of about a week and learn something really relevant, really fast, and it's very good.
Thank you.
And I've noticed those courses have evolved from being classical accounting and strategy
Yeah.
largely into how to write AI prompts and how
Yeah.
to use AI inside your organization. Now, I would imagine 80% of this audience probably saw the spring update from OpenAI. And what I want to ask you is, where do you see, and you speak a lot about AI, where do you see AI in education
Yeah.
and how that may help you evolve Section, which you should all subscribe to?
By the way, great sponsored plant there. That was fantastic. You didn't tell me in advance, but it was a treat.
Well, let me be the first to say thank you, Rod Father. That wasn't planted. Well, I'll speak more generally to AI. I think AI is going to be great for education. I speak a lot about AI, and I think it's going to be great on the front end in terms of helping tutoring and helping kids get through a course faster. I think it'll probably disrupt education at the lowest levels. At an elite university, of which I'm a part of, we're not in the business of educating, we're in the business of certification. Our admissions department makes sure that you're not mentally ill, that you play well with others, that you can take a test, that you were born in a supportive environment or overcame a not supportive environment. We're basically the HR department of every corporation, but we do much finer screening. And you get through this 4 years, and then a corporation's willing to pay our grads 90 grand instead of 60 grand. And so kids are willing to pay us a lot of money. We're really a giant HR department. In terms of actual learning, I think AI is going to be really powerful. I don't have a lot of what I call real insight into how it's going to change. I'll do a broader question. I think a lot about AI. The risks of AI are that, one, it's going to come sentient and kill us. I'm not a philosopher, but I don't buy it. I think that's narcissism. All these tech bros, after they invest their $10 million in stock from DeepMind or whatever, want to pretend they invented the singular point to save humanity or destroy it. I think it's total narcissism. 2, that it's self-healing weapons, super weapons. You can see that, but we've managed to manage nuclear weapons, bioweapons. You know, there's no reason, if we can manage nuclear weapons, I think we should be able to manage self-healing drones and AI weapons. The third thing is concentration of wealth. That's a big problem. There's a small hand. You realize Microsoft has invested more in AI than the rest of the world combined? All VCs, all other companies. You realize how concentrated? By the way, OpenAI, it's not OpenAI, it's Microsoft AI. I mean, it's just ridiculous that we pretend this is a separate company. They fire their CEO, and Satya Nadella, who doesn't even have a seat on the board, goes, no, I want you to rehire him. And he's back, okay? And Anthropic, it's not Anthropic, it's Amazon. I mean, it's the same people. The concentration of wealth is, again, really scary. Misinformation is a big threat. Running up to the election, you're going to see a bunch of deep and shallow fakes. I think you'll see a bunch of videos of Biden and Harris that make them look a little older and a little less articulate, respectively, and you won't even notice it, but it'll turn you off them. What I call shallow fakes. And then in the 2 weeks leading up to the election, I think we're going to see a bunch of deep fakes that show shootings and violence at key swing state election polling places that scare people from voting. I think we're going to see that. But the biggest threat of AI, and this is a flex, I was on the phone with the Secretary of Homeland Security last week in the US. Because I'm desperate for your affirmation. I'll do it.
Well, who's a better audience?
Yeah, is that the weakest flex in the world?
Yeah.
Anyways,
But you're having more fun here.
Department of Homeland Security is in charge of the ports, critical infrastructure, and making sure that terrorism doesn't come in. Anyways, he said, what are the biggest threats of AI? What are we thinking about? And he went through all these things, and I'm like, no, you're missing the biggest threat. The biggest threat of AI is loneliness. And that is, we're raising an entire generation of young men who believe they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen with an algorithm. And the massive number of increases in searches has been registered for AI girlfriends. And I think what you're going to have is a group of lonely young men in our critical infrastructure and even in the armed services who establish relationships with bots and sequester from society. And if I were a terrorist organization, I would beta test 1 million times, A/B test 1 million times a second, how to move young men who establish a relationship with a AI girlfriend down a funnel towards radicalization, and use biometrics to see when they're tired, when they're most vulnerable, and say, oh, you're on the SS Forward Carrier Strike Force, we need you to turn off the drone detection system. Oh, you're at the Long Beach Harbor, we need you to not check this cargo coming in. And I think if they can identify 500,000 lonely young men, which will not be hard in the US right now, I think moving them down the funnel, they might find 5,000 of them that are willing to perform acts of terror. So, and also just more and more men. There's 3 million able-bodied men in America and something like 400,000 in the UK that aren't even working. They're not even pursuing work. A third of Gen Z men in America have given up on dating. They're not even trying. So we have this, we're mammals. If anyone who has a dog, the worst thing you can do to a dog is leave it alone all day. They literally go crazy. I think we're raising a generation of young men who are going to be so lonely they're going to go crazy and become violent. I think that's the threat of AI. I think it's just incredibly disappointing that the most well-resourced, intelligent companies in the world are trying to convince young people that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen. And what I'll wrap up is, and I think you guys know this, nothing amazing will ever happen to you on a screen. Nothing. Nothing will ever happen to you that's really incredible when you're alone. It just won't. The key to success is how much time you spend out of your house and your willingness to take uncomfortable risks. Full stop. And that doesn't happen on a screen. And the risks they're asking you to take on screens have asymmetric risk to the downside. So I think the biggest risk of AI, hands down, is loneliness, which is another call to action if you're a young person. If you know someone who's sequestering from society and is spending a lot of time alone and getting really into Reddit or Discord or porn or too much online dating or too much scrolling, really try and get them out of the house, get them around people, get them in the company of others. I mean, that's it. Again, I'll go back to dogs. My dogs, if they could, would just lie on me all day. We need to lie on each other more. We need to be more in person. Anyways, I'll wrap up there. Lie on others.
Okay, pizza and beers upstairs. Pizzas might be a bit cold, but it was worth it. I'm sure you can agree.